Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. If you're a fan of the Rebel series, or Rogue One, you'll know that in the early days of the Galactic Civil War, the Alliance to Restore the Republic was mostly made up of small individual resistance groups that were loosely allied with one another. Most of these groups had their own political goals and agendas along with their own list of grievances with the Empire. The only thing that really united all of these groups was their shared hatred for the regime. And as we all saw when Jyn Erso reported that the Death Star program was a real threat and needed to be stopped, many of these individual groups were hesitant to join this operation. Well, except for the Fish Boys of Mon Cala. They ride and die homies. But despite all of this lack of coordination, all of these early groups seemed to prefer a specific starfighter, the RZ-1A wing. Today I want to explain why the Rebel Alliance and other early insurgent groups used the RZ-1A wing starfighter, because upon first glance, this is definitely not the most logical choice for a decentralized resistance movement. If you understand the development of the RZ-1A wing, you'll probably understand why it's a very unlikely starfighter for the Rebellion to use. Now, the RZ-1A wing was developed out of the prototype known as the R-22, which was created by Kuat Systems Engineering. You might recognize Kuat Systems Engineering. It was a subsidiary of Kuat Drive Yards. It was one of the largest ship manufacturers in the late Republic era. And it, along with its subsidiary Rothana Heavy Engineering, was responsible for the majority of the military contracts given out by the Republic during the Clone Wars. They built everything, from the Venator-class Star Destroyer to the ATTE, and also several starfighters whose performances and technical readouts during the war would help Kuat Systems Engineering develop the R-22 prototype. KSE's designs included the Delta 7B Ether Sprite class light interceptor, the ETA-2 Actus class light interceptor, and the Alpha 3 Nimbus class V-wing starfighter. Two of these starfighters, the Delta 7 and ETA-2, were specifically built for Jedi pilots who often pushed their airframes to the limit. The fact that the R-22 prototype actually shares some design features with these two legendary Jedi fighters shows us just how advanced and powerful this airframe was. But still, it's incredibly strange for the Rebel Alliance to get access from a ship designed by KSE. Let me explain why. After the collapse of the Republic and the rise of the Empire, KSE would remain one of the largest military contractors for the Imperial military. Every major capital ship used by the Empire, including its ship-of-the-line Imperial-class Star Destroyer, was first developed at Kuat's famous orbital shipyard. They even made the AT-AT Walker. A huge part of Palpatine's political strategy was pacification of the entire galaxy, and this was done through a massive military force that he had yet to create. The only way he was able to afford such a large military force was through the nationalization of the military-industrial complex and by building in massive scale. Kuat Drive Yards would actually remain independent throughout the Galactic Empire's reign, but because the majority of their contracts came from the Empire, one could say that their workplace culture was very pro-Imperial. On top of that, the Empire restricted and heavily regulated the sales of weapons and starfighters, making it incredibly hard for insurgents to buy anything from a starfighter to even a pallet of proton torpedoes. Which is why the Rebel Alliance would use Clone Wars-era Y-wings stolen from Imperial scrapyards, hijacked EF-76 Nebulon B escort frigates, and even the X-wing was a prototype that was gifted to the Rebellion by Incom designers and engineers who defected from the Empire after they nationalized their company. So why did the R-22 prototype fall into the Rebellion's hands? Well, here's what happened. During the rise of the Empire, the Kuat Systems Engineering faced some unexpected competition from a company known as Senior Fleet Systems. This was a relatively unheard of arms manufacturer owned by the IGBC. They had produced a few extremely high-tech ships during the Clone Wars, but these were mainly one-offs. More importantly, however, this company actually had very close ties to the Sith through their IGBC contacts. And Chancellor Palpatine personally had a connection with Rafe Sr., who would become the head of SFS during the rise of the Empire. At the time, Kuat Drive Yards was bidding on this massive starfighter contract. This was supposed to be a multi-purpose starfighter that essentially rolled all of the Empire's needs into one platform. It's kind of similar to the F-35 program the United States has, which is designed to take all of the needs of the various military branches and roll it into one fighter program. Based on the Republic's lessons from the Clone Wars, specifically the failure of larger snub fighters like the ARC-170 against droid fighters, along with Palpatine's own vision for the galaxy, the Empire decided it needed a small and nimble fighter that could meet all of the Navy's needs, and would still be very economic as far as initial price and maintenance costs. This means whatever the prototype would be, it would need to be designed very smartly and be very easy to scale up in production. Now, Kuat Systems Engineering would actually lose this contract, which is something I'm sure their CFO did not plan for in his reports about the company's financial forecasts. Senior Fleet Systems would create the TIE Fighter program, which for decades made up the majority of the Imperial Navy's entire starfighter corps. And so what happens to the prototype R-22 program? Well, KSE actually sells it off to some local planetary defense force. And eventually the Alliance to Restore the Republic were able to purchase several of these R-22s, at which point they were able to modify these ships into the RZ-1A wing spec. They were even able to eventually produce them at scale. And so technically, KSE did nothing wrong here. You could even say they're not responsible for the RZ-1A wing. Now, from an economic standpoint, the TIE line was a significant breakthrough, though. The engine actually had 0 moving parts, and maintenance was extremely easy. But the Empire should have bought the R-22 prototype as well and built a few of these things, because it was an excellent fighter and it was very different from the TIE fighter and could do different type of missions. And better yet, this would have prevented the Rebellion from getting their hands on this amazing starfighter. The RZ-1A wing was first and foremost a long-range interceptor. The TIE fighter was more of a short-range interceptor. From its inception, the A-wing has always been one of the fastest production sublight speed starfighters in the galaxy. The ship featured a pair of oversized Novaldex J-77s, which just happened to have a cockpit and some other doohickeys attached to it. Paired with a Class 1 hyperdrive, there are very few ships that can outrun the A-wing. The starfighter also has a shield system, countermeasures, laser cannons, and concussion missiles for larger targets. At just 6.9 meters in length, this was an incredibly small and compact package of a starfighter, and this unfortunately did affect the power and functionality of the A-Wing's other systems. I would say that the A-Wing shields are basically useless, which is why a lot of pilots abandon the shield generator altogether in order to boost the sublight speed of the ship even more. And the chassis was actually relatively strong for its size and had enough armor plating on it that it would protect the ship from some minor glancing blows. The small size of the A-Wing was even more important because the Rebel Alliance had tiny capital ships with very small internal hangars. Keeping your fighter size down was a huge plus for the Rebellion. Now, the A-Wing did lack heavy firepower like proton torpedoes, which makes its long-range interception capabilities a little more questionable. But once again, the starfighter is all about speed. It was so fast that it's reported that the Empire started the TIE interceptor program as a reaction to the A-Wing. Now, if you guys take a look at early combat situations that the Rebel Alliance faced, they were mostly outgunned and weren't able to do much in a standing fight. And so their tactics mainly involved using good intel to find gaps in between Imperial patrols, and then they would plan missions in which their time over the target area was extremely limited so that their ships could escape back into hyperspace before Imperial reinforcements could even arrive. And so whether it was the A-Wing or the CR-90 Corvette, all of these ships had to be incredibly fast and also were designed to specifically run blockades. In those early days, if the Rebel fleet ever got caught in a fight with the Imperial Navy, they basically lost. Now, the reason why the Empire rejected the R-22 platform was not only for political reasons, but because it was way too costly. While the Alliance to Restore the Republic definitely ran into funding issues occasionally, they oftentimes had a much larger issue with fielding enough trained pilots and getting access to enough war material. And so the RZ-1A wing's price tag was not really a problem, and its performance and its ability to get pilots back alive was a much larger factor in adopting this starship. Well, there you have it, guys. That is all the information I have for you on why the Rebel Alliance chose the A-Wing, and this will be an incredibly important fighter that we'll probably also see in the Cassian Andor series if it covers the early Rebellion period of time. Well, guys, let me know in the comment section below what you think about the RZ-1A wing. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic